it's a bit like a checkbox exercise still. It's not embedded in an organization's culture. And I think it says a lot about, the person running the ship at the top of the helm, right? It's, bringing in diverse people is more than just filling a quota in the front door.
Welcome to CEO, the podcast that celebrates women who are leading with impact and redefining success. I'm your host, Sophie, and each week we'll bring you powerful stories and practical insights to empower and fuel your own leadership journey. Today, Ruby McCormack came on the podcast. She has over 20 years experience in leadership and specialist roles, including program management, strategy, transformation, process re-engineering, content and product management within media, fintech, content management and service operations sectors, including PE and startups, as well as FTSE 100 global organisations. Ruby's extensive experience of front and back office provides a unique perspective and understanding of stakeholder and business needs, demonstrating ability to bring teams together to collaborate, enabling operational business or technology strategies to deliver the organisation's vision and goals. An authentic leader with a passion for leading and building high-performing teams, developing diverse and inclusive talent through sponsorship and coaching. She's a big believer in a learn it all and growth mindset, and that individuals, no matter their background, should be given the opportunity with leadership commitment in supporting growth and success. We spoke about having life outside of work, the power of a coach, and sometimes you just need to take a step back before taking the next step. I love this one. I hope you do too. Hi, Ruby. Thank you for joining us today. It's so nice to have you all the way from, I was going to say sunny UK, but it's not too sunny today. But yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm in the coast of England at the moment, but yes, it's not sunny. It's grey.
Yeah. And that was part of the reason I was like, let's move out of the UK. But it's great here today as well. So let's dive straight in. We'd love to give everyone a little bit of a background around yourself, your career so far, and basically how you got to where you got to.
Sure. Okay. I'll try and keep it short. So I grew up in London. I'm British. My first job, weirdly, so I left school at 17. Ended up from London, ended up in Scotland, did my secondary education there. I left school at like 17. My first job was waiting tables, which I kind of loved, to be honest. And then my career, I ended up doing like sales admin for a small sportswear company in Scotland. Golf is big. And then I got my first job into financial services kind of by accident. I ended up starting as a data entry clerk for business in London in the UK. And that was back, where we were still using like DOS screens to enter data and, we were copy and pasting, not the sophisticated technology we had today. And then moved through that. My journey ended up starting very much in data, moving to be a data researcher for broker earnings. And then I ended up as a production assistant. I used to make CD-ROMs with data in it. I ended up going there, built some websites, and then ended up as a business analyst. I became a product manager in the investment banking space, and then managed projects and ended up going into kind of the program management, project management space, before ending up in kind of business operations before it was a thing back in the late 90s. Oh my God, I'm showing my age. And then ended up kind of moving around financial services into media and professional services, back in product, and then transitioned into technology probably over the last 8 years. And then again, back before transformation was even a word, ended up being involved much more in big company transformation programs, mostly around as a result of mergers and acquisitions. So I've done a lot of that transformation work. And my last role was COO for technology for Kantar. And since then, I've left and I kind of do a bit of freelancing these days, doing some consultancy work and playing in this transformation space.
I love the fact that you left school at like 17. I left school at 16. So it means that you can still do well if you leave school early. But I don't think you can anymore in the UK. I don't think you can leave before 18.
Really? They've changed that? No, I honestly, I mean, even with my children now, I'm like, do you know what? do what makes you happy, because I'm not downplaying university. I think if that's where you want to go, which my oldest son is, he just started university this year and he loves it, but he's studious, it's in his nature. But I'm like, if it doesn't feel like it's the thing for you, then don't spend your time doing that. Go explore life, right?
Do you call it? I think it's this, yeah, literally, like you say, the school of life. Go and gain experiences, and that will hopefully, it increase, I suppose, your experience before anyone else gets into the world of work. So yeah, do what you want to do, and if you don't enjoy it, there's no point doing it. And also, it can be expensive. So if you don't need the costs, don't do it.
You don't need the bills before you start your life, right? So everyone's different.
Yeah, exactly. And you've managed so many different transformations, obviously being at Cancer most recently. In your experience, what is the biggest roadblock to a successful transformation strategy and obviously executing that successfully? And how would you overcome it?
So I think there's a couple of things that I've seen. So I've seen it done well, and I've seen what happens when it's not done well. I think clear, decisive strategy, well communicated and consistent. So if leadership are not giving unified messages about the direction of travel for the company and why you're doing the transformation and what it means for people on the ground, it's very hard to get commitment from people to drive that delivery. And you kind of need everyone on board. Like, it gets very hard when you meet people that don't understand why something's being delivered or what you're asking for. And then I think the second thing is a culture that allows for safe and open communication and dialogue. The number of times that, I've done transformation programs where you start digging into a problem, or let's say, software engineering, you're building, one of the transformations I did in one of my roles was transforming the way we delivered content and data using AI technology. And everybody kind of had this playbook that they were following. And when something didn't feel like it kind of worked in an approach to get to delivering an outcome for something, people didn't really speak up. And it wasn't until you start digging into, well, why has this not been successful and why is it taking so long, that people then slowly start telling you, well, I didn't approve of the way we were doing it. And so I think having that courage and the safety in an organization to speak up and not, be penalized for saying, I don't think that works. That I've seen as the second biggest thing. So those two things really compound, you can guarantee some level of failure there, really.
I agree. I think having that safety net of being able to be open and talk within a business is really important. And that's the only way that you can all get on the same page, is if someone doesn't agree, they need to feel they're in a safe space to go, actually, I don't agree with that. And then as long as you come back with a solid argument for why not, then, you can all push forward from it.
Yeah. And I try and encourage my teams to do the same. And I think as a leader, you want to hire different people, right? We're going to talk a bit about diversity. So you're going to have a team that are going to disagree, and that's okay. That's what you want, right? But you also want a team to be able to stand by their own ideas and be vocal, but also be open to being challenged. And I try and get people there so that I don't need to step in and be the mediator when people can't agree. They need to learn to work together and disagree in the right way, challenge each other. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think challenging each other is important in the right space and with the right people. And from your career, which is, a breadth of, so many amazing things that you've done, what do you think is the biggest takeaway from your career so far?
Gosh, it's almost like saying, what's my proudest moment? I think, it's weird because I think when you've left school at that age, and in the age where your parents are like, oh, if you don't go to university, I don't know, your career prospects might be limited. And being from, a Chinese family, like going to university is a big deal. So I think my biggest takeaway from my career, honestly, is I'm slightly disbelieved that I got so far without a plan. And, and I think the lessons I've learned through my career, and the thing that, if I'm saying less about the proud achievement, but what wisdom have I drawn from my career? I would say, now I want to work for, my focus is much more finding work where I get to work with great people and doing very meaningful work. And that things that, I care about now is less about position and more about, does this company have a good culture? Do I think I can thrive in it? Can I be myself? And I think more and more, I don't want to compromise like my well-being and my boundaries. And, I've had a couple of experiences working in also very toxic cultures and how it's impacted my performance, my team's performance. And, when you're focused on, firefighting the things that are not moving the needle on a company's performance, you just wonder why you're there. If you can't do your job, it becomes one of these things that really eat you up. So I think my greatest accomplishment is being open to learning, I think, on my journey and just pushing forward and taking the experiences that I've had and not kind of giving up on pursuing a career and looking for something great to be part of. But yeah, that's kind of how I would answer that question.
I say it's strange, but I think as you get older and go through your career, how you develop, how you change, and how the piece that you want to focus on, that will change. You're not going to necessarily go into a business and be like, okay, I want to be the COO or the CTO anymore, because you've done that. Or, there's a new challenge that you want to face that's more personal to you. And I think realizing that over time, you will change your mind. You will go through different stages in your life where different things mean different things to you. So I think that's important to realize. And I want to touch upon something there, because obviously now you're talking about, you've come out of, I say, the corporate world, in the sense of, leading these massive teams and, really being the chief, the COO, right? When do you know is the right time to move on? When do you know, actually, this is a toxic environment or this isn't serving my purpose? How did you come to terms with that?
I think moving on, it's kind of like a bit of it's a timing thing. It's funny that, right? Because we were just talking about the timing of what's happening in your life. And I think partly it's time where, and it's a bit cheesy, when people say you're not kind of needed anymore, is great, because it means your team's doing a great job, people are working together, and your role as a leader is like, well, you've done a good job, right? And I think the second thing is when it doesn't become challenging anymore, you're not growing. And I think the further you move in your career, again, what growth means to you is a little different. And what is challenging to you changes. I think for much of my career, the challenge for me has been it's been a bit of a confidence thing. And I think women often find this, right? We can absolutely, be brave and show confidence. But, the number of times something shows up or you find a job and you talk yourself out of something, and thank goodness. And when I say coming together of timing and everything, and we can talk a little bit about this, like having good sponsorship makes a difference. It helps you with your blind spots. They push you where you don't often see that you're like, well, I don't know if I can do that job. I don't think I know enough, and having a sponsor or a mentor or coach that's like, no, you can totally do it. Go for it. Really does help. So I think all those things tell you when it's time to move on.
Yeah. And something that I've learned, or I listen to a lot of podcasts, right? Hence why I'm doing a podcast now, but listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books. And I think people always think, oh, you're quitting, you're giving up, you're moving on. I always say, don't ever think that you're quitting and it's a bad thing, because quitting can also be seen as a good thing. A lot of people forget that. I think it was Stephen Bartlett who said it. And I was like, that has stuck with me. That, if you quit something, it doesn't mean it's negative. It means that actually you're going on to be fulfilled in something else that you think is more suited to you.
Yeah. And then I also listen to a lot of podcasts. I can't remember this author. Maybe I'll give it to you offline. But there's a woman that wrote a book and it was about gambling, but it was something along the lines, how to know when to quit when you're ahead. Not in those exact words, but there's an art form to knowing, like, quitting is not a bad thing. That's kind of how you win, was bit of what I took away from that is knowing the time when you need to walk away. And, the word quitting is obviously a very negative thing. But I think, like I said, like people change and grow. And, one of the things that I found challenging is once you're in these executive positions, you get to see a little bit behind the curtain and you won't always agree, right? Still a lot of very old school practices in corporate business. Depends on the industry that you're in. So I don't want to be too specific, but you see things and you're like, that doesn't align with my values. And it's easy to give up because I think, and this is for anyone that falls into that sort of diversity background, right? Whether it's your education, the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, female, men, everybody in some way has a challenge. But it's like when you start to represent an underrepresented group, it's more important that you're there rather than giving up because it helps others get into position. It allows you to sponsor other people too from where you are, right? Allows you to play a part.
Going into that a bit more, actually, the diversity piece you touched upon there. How, across your career, how have you seen it from a diversity standpoint? Have you seen many women that are within these leadership roles? As a leader yourself, I'm sure that you give anyone an opportunity, but how have you found it working in the corporate?
I think companies generally want to hire in, but this is just purely my experience. I can't speak for others, but I do see it's a bit like a checkbox exercise still. It's not embedded in an organization's culture. And I think it says a lot about, the person running the ship at the top of the helm, right? It's, bringing in diverse people is more than just filling a quota in the front door. Do they thrive? And we don't have enough data about this stuff. Where do they go in their career? How long are they in position for? Do they move across industry? Do they continue to move up? Do they become the CEOs of the future? How long do people stay? Like, do they get penalized because they leave and have children? So there's all these areas that I think we're not there yet. And we may be having the conversation, but there's not a lot. And I think you and I talked a bit about this. There's not a lot of data that can drive action. And then it's very difficult for you to create it when it's not just a metrics game. It's like, well, how do you measure some things that are intangible? You can correlate company performance, team retention. So what are we missing that we're not embedding, D&I in? I mean, I've even seen companies put D&I as one of their top agendas and then take away budgets for someone to do something. Like, we talk about it, but then it's like, oh, what's actually going on? So, yeah.
I mean, D&I has been a massive topic, obviously, with myself working within the recruitment space. It's something that we talk about all the time. And I do agree to an extent that it can just be a tick box exercise. There's so much more to it, though, because once someone's in a business, that's what you have to really think about. It's one thing getting people through the door, but once they're in a business, how do you give them a safe space? How do you make them feel heard? How do you ensure that they're fulfilling their careers? And then it should organically grow and you should hopefully be able to bring more people in. But I think it comes down to, yes, bringing them in, but after that, it's how you look after them that will see them progress, see them stay, and still see them bring other people up and with them on their journey. And talking about, you mentioned the going away, having kids, that side of things. How did you navigate that? Because obviously you've got kids, you've had a really impressive career. How did you navigate that at the time? Did you step back? Did you continue working? How was it for you?
I did a bit of both. I think I took both times. I took about 6 months maternity. So I didn't take the full year. And it wasn't like, the reason wasn't, oh, if I don't go back in, something will happen. I find the companies I was in at the time were actually very supportive. I'm like trying to think back to the timing of everything. I think actually both times it timed with me moving on anyway. So after maternity, I think I went back for a bit, but the business had changed a little bit and I'd ended up just coincidentally moving on to something else. Don't think it was deliberate, but I think with maternity and even paternity topics, we're much better at those now. And I think with COVID, people are more mindful of caring about people more than I think before COVID, so it feels even more different now, like even safer space for women to go, or fathers, right? To go and look after their children and come back. Like it's a different vibe, I think, for sure.
It's a lot more flexible, having the pandemic. I think if it taught companies anything, it taught companies to give people a little bit more flexibility around working from home or different working hours, and it showed that people can still do their jobs. Someone I know, they do a 4-day working week, and they've got a little kid, and it's easy for them to then have the Friday off, and that works, and it seems to work for the company as well. So it's trying to bring in all these different things that's going to align with the business and also whoever's having a child at the time. But there's so many different things that you can do. I think just having that flexibility of working from home and actually working your hours around, your childcare, it's really useful nowadays.
Yeah, and I hope the working from home culture, I know that's slight shift back. I hope that flexibility doesn't change, because I really think it does motivate people more. Like, you're more mindful of going, oh my God, okay, I need to get this thing done. I think you're more likely to put in a little extra because you've got that space to not worry about the stuff at home. There's no tension at home because, you're trying to figure out who's cooking dinner, like all these little things that get in the way. You kind of take that pressure off a bit.
It's the little things definitely there. Outside working from home a little bit more now, and it's you can get those little things done throughout the day that you need to, and it makes your life a lot easier. And I think it gives you a nicer balance, as a person, and as you progress, it gives you a little bit more thinking space as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens over the next few years. I think companies are trying to bring people back into the office, but it really depends on the businesses and what works for people.
Yeah.
Staying on that diversity piece and talking about obviously getting more women into leadership, actually, I think that's really what we're trying to do, is empower people to take, those steps into it. What do you think women can do more of in the workplace to help them progress?
I think we need to support each other more. Like, and I mean, one of the best cultures I've worked in, I think, was inclusion was a huge part. And it was less about, D and I, than it was just more about people. And I think as women, we should watch out for each other, stand up for each other. If you ever see behavior that is toxic, I really think women connect in very different ways. Like, I've been lucky that I've had a lot of women managers and leaders that I've worked under, and I'm still in contact with them. And when opportunities come up, we still look out for each other and be like, I think this will be great for you, and it doesn't have to be just supporting teams that work under you, but it's your peers that are next to you. Sometimes even the leaders you work for, when you've got a good culture, you can kind of guide each other a little bit. And that's a great relationship to have. I think that gets missed, and certain industries are less like they have less of that culture. And I think things like setting up your own coaching circles. I know Lean In that Sheryl Sandberg does, they have like coaching circles and stuff like that. But it doesn't need to be sophisticated. You basically, find a few people that love the same topics you do, and, you discuss challenges at work. And, it'd be great if we had that expansive network consistently everywhere, where you can talk to people that doesn't know your boss and doesn't know you, and you can have a really open, honest conversation about what's frustrating you. And I think these things are really important, and we should take advantage of that, right? Because, again, having children, you create these like little NCT groups, and you create little mother groups, and the things that you end up discussing and how you're able to help each other, you just don't know. So I think the best thing is to be open, look for sponsorship. Don't wait for it to come to you. Find someone in your organization that you're like, oh, I really like the way that person works. and it doesn't always have to be a woman, it could be a man, that, think creatively and don't be shy and be vocal. If there's an aspiration, be ready to ask for it. Yeah. Don't be afraid to say, there's an opportunity there. I really want to go for that, and find out what it takes to get there and do the work.
Yeah. We connected actually, say a little while back, but we connected quite a bit on that coaching piece. I know that's something that we're both really passionate about. And I think that to elevate yourself in your career, I've seen it. I've had coaches, and that's really helped me and supported me, because I can then go and speak to someone outside of my job. They don't know, like you say, anything about who I work with, the situation, and they can give me like a real time kind of lowdown on, okay, cool, no, manage it like this, or you can do this, or what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And I think, like you say, having that support system, having a coach that's outside of that, or even if you don't want to pay for a coach, but you find someone that you can connect with and have those conversations with, I think is so beneficial, especially when you're feeling that you might be, as they slightly alone, but if you are in a male dominant environment and there's not many women there, go and find people outside of that you can have those conversations with.
Yeah. And there are lots of networks out there. I mean, some of them are often too big, in my opinion. Create your own, create your own group, and, I've spoken to other people, like my friends that work in consultancies, and one of my male friends is on like a woman's group on WhatsApp, because he's like, they keep asking me questions and advice, and he's like created this weird group that's grown, and women are talking to each other. Like somebody's saying, oh, I'm looking for this type of role, do you know anyone? And I know we've got all these social media apps that do like referrals and stuff like that, but get to know people so you can actually refer them is also a great way to help you pay it forward, right? So you just start creating that energy around you where people are supporting and putting forward people in roles. Think, good or bad, I've seen, men do that for years. Why shouldn't women? So just something else to think about.
You're not the only one who's mentioned around the network piece. I think building your network is great. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. A lot of guys, and us women sometimes do, will go down the pub, especially in the UK, have a chat, and that's how you build your network. You start speaking to people, you can share, I suppose, the challenges you've had. It's so different now, and especially if you're working for a global business and you're not getting out and meeting people and speaking to people. But I think building your network any way you can, even if it is just a coffee, get out, meet people, have those conversations, whether they can help you now, help you in the future. You never know what's going to happen. So always have conversations and be open to anyone and everything. Yeah. I think that's really useful.
Yeah, I agree.
And with your passion around, I suppose, the coaching and development piece, how do you approach like individual growth plans? Because you've managed, like I say, large teams, a lot of people. Are there any particular methods you use to identify someone's strengths and then help them excel as well?
I don't follow any particular method, but I do, I've inherited teams before, I've built my own teams before, and even in choosing talent, I think it's always good to know where someone wants to go, what they love doing. It's like, I think often we're very good at making assumptions. Like it's easy to read someone's CV and, but I think getting to know your team and what they love doing, what they hate doing is important to build the right plan. And some people won't know the direction they want to go, right? But I know people that come in, they're like, my goal is I want to be a CTO one day, but you got to ask the why. Why? What is it? What's about that role that makes you excited, or like makes that aspiration something that you feel you can really, you want to be part of, because it's more than just getting a title. And then I think working with them to create, make sure the things like OKRs align to them being able to demonstrate the things that they're interested in, and also removing things from them that is not the best use of their talent, right? A good example is, I've been in situations, and awkward ones too, where you give an architect who's a brilliant architect, and you're like, oh, do you know what? You're so great. We're going to promote you. We're going to give you a team. And suddenly that architect's like, not a very good, it's not his thing. Nobody's asked it. It's like, there's an assumption where I know you should get promoted. Sure, they want the job because it's a promotion, but you need to consider career progression doesn't have to be a linear way. It could be lots of different ways. And when you think about growth plans, if you align it to what somebody loves and their aspiration, it becomes an easy, thing to help, right? It's definitive, it's specific, going things like SMART goals. You can point them to the right mentors, you can challenge them in the right ways. And as organizations change and opportunities open up, you're preparing them for that succession of someone else or yourself as well. So, where I've seen it happen really well and, individuals come, our job's to remove the obstacles so that they can come to work every day and love and get to do what they do. And when it works well and you see them progress without you, it's amazing. Like that's why we're here, is to be of service, right? So, that's how I see kind of the growth planning piece. You got to think a little bigger, a bit beyond, not in the, I want you to be able to do X, Y, and Z by, that's just a deliverable, right? Something big and audacious that you can plan towards is kind of the way to go.
A few things I like there. So first of all, the why I think is really important. That's something that I've learned probably over the past few years, is when you have a team, understand their why and, what do you want to do, but the why behind it, but not even just for your team, but for yourself. The more you know what your why is, the more you can go out and do what you want to do. And you'll always have that goal in the back of your head, because you know what your why is, you know why you're driven, you know why you're waking up every morning, and it makes life a lot easier. So for anyone who's, I suppose, struggling with, I feel a little bit lost, find what you want to do, figure out the why behind it, and that's going to help you drive yourself forward and have that organic, driven mentality. That's something that I found for myself is really important. I have to understand why I'm doing things. Otherwise, it's just like roaming around like, oh yeah, let me try this. But yeah, you want a little bit of a structure and focus, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, I have to say, as you get older, the why becomes more important and you may know less what you want to do. I mean, for me, you're like, oh, what's my next challenge? Is this still a space I want to be in? What else can I do with my skills? So, be prepared for that. That thought process completely changes.
Yeah. The other thing, and I'm going to come back to the point there, because I like that, but going back to the other thing you said around when you have a team, or even if it's yourself, it's not necessarily the next step for you to manage a team. You can progress by just kind of growing your skill set and taking on more responsibility within, say you're in a technical environment, but progressing upwards, say whether it is into architecture or running the whole, I suppose, development piece from a technical side, not just from the team. I think a lot of people forget that. A lot of people think that it is a case of, okay, well, you've hit the top of being, I don't know, the best developer here. The next route is for management, but management isn't for everyone. And if you don't genuinely enjoy managing people, then you don't have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different ways to go about your career now, especially in the modern age. Yeah, it's so different than when, 20 years ago, when, 25 years ago, when I really started.
It's definitely not as black and white. And that's then going on to what you mentioned around, your why does change. And when you're moving careers and leaving roles, then going into new positions, figuring out where you can, I suppose, pivot a little bit and go into a different role. Your skill set, especially if for like yourself, you've been a COO, you've probably seen so many different avenues. You've probably got a vast skill set there. So then it's like, okay, cool. How can I pivot? And can I go and do something else that's then fulfilling me, utilizing my skill set? But it might not be a COO, it might be something else. So how have you navigated that? Because obviously coming out of your most recent role into what you're doing now, it's a little bit of a pivot. So how was that from, I suppose, a mental standpoint? And what did you do to kind of get over any hurdles that you've had?
To be honest, I think for me, it was nice to take a bit of a breath. So I left, early this year. Probably since I've had a child, not that I'm taking maternity leave as a vacation, but I don't think I've taken proper time off. So I actually took some time off before accepting, an assignment to do a bit of kind of fractional consulting via a friend and a recommendation. And, I've gradually kind of worked into it. But I think until you take a break from it, I think the last 6, 8 years has been like a marathon sprint. So for me, taking that time off has been really good to figure out what my next step is and do I want it? Like, it's been weird because I have, been looking at new roles in that executive space. And even when I've been interviewing for them, I've kind of not been sure how much I want it. And, I think it's good for people to understand like that happens, right? And that's okay. And I think now I've kind of finding my groove thinking, actually, I quite enjoy that fractional work. If I can advise and support other leaders, I really enjoy doing that. Like I'm working with a great female CEO at the moment, and I'm working with another female founder at the moment. And I love that because I like that they're taking these big chances and doing these great big jobs. And even if I'm not there, I want to see them succeed. And I have a lot of fun working with them. So I'm still kind of figuring it out, and I'm going to just be open to where it goes. I think when you're open, you kind of go on a bit of an adventure, and sometimes jobs come up that you wouldn't go for. And then you kind of go, oh, okay, maybe I'll give this a go. So I'm kind of still waiting to see how I feel next year, going into next year, what my next step is. So, yeah.
Yeah, you got to figure it out along the way. It's probably, like we said, when you left the school at 17, figure it out. And I know it gets hard when you have a career and all you've known is, okay, work every day. Okay, I want to be the COO. I want to be, the top dog. And then it's like, okay, cool. I'm back to my 17-year-old self where I'm like, okay, what do I need to do now? Or where do I want to go? Where do I see myself going? And I think taking that time, like you mentioned, stepping back, that's the only way you're going to be able to go, okay, I enjoy this. I'm having fun doing this. Let's keep doing this. And let's see how I can create a career from it again, basically.
Yeah. And I think, the pressure, I think we should take the pressure off ourselves as women sometimes. I think unless you have a reason, and, for me now, taking those big roles or, advising and consulting, I want to enable an environment in other companies that allow for, DE&I that, I'm trying at the moment to get onto, non-executive board positions because I'd like to represent someone that does not come from an education that's traditional. I have a diverse background experience. I don't think in a typical way, like, I think your cultural heritage, distills different belief systems in people. And sometimes they can bring different viewpoints to a conversation. So I'd like to kind of lean into that a little bit and see how I can contribute in a different way. So that for me is a purpose that I'd like to continue to do. And whatever I do is to play in that space. I don't need to be, a D&I ambassador. I don't need to be a big leader, but how can I influence a change of conversation?
I think that's really important. And you having that as, I suppose, a little bit of your why right now. That's just driving you forward, and then you'll navigate through it and see how you come out at the end. And something else I wanted to touch upon with you, because I've known you for a little while now. I know, when you were working in some of these big corporates, they were full on. There was a lot going on within these businesses, and it's fast paced. Your leadership style had to be fast paced. It was very much a high stakes environment, and obviously it can be really stressful. How, at that point, did you manage your own well-being, avoid burnout, and then also maintaining that performance piece as well?
I think resilience comes from experience. I've built good resilience. I think because my approach to work is, people talk about work-life balance, but it's, I think for me, it's more about setting your boundaries and knowing what you're capable of and when you need to ask for help as well, right? We don't talk about that in corporate, in the working world, and I think you got to support each other, as peers, as team members, so that you kind of quarterbacking a little bit for each other and people pay it forward. And when companies are going through transformation, it can get really, really chaotic with communication, people worried about their jobs. You get this protectional kind of fear, instability. And if you're driving the change, it's hard to motivate people sometimes. So I think working with your teams and making sure they're okay, and in turn, it's okay for them to help you. Like, being a leader doesn't mean you're invincible. It's like being very pragmatic and, focusing on the job at hand, of course, but like rallying people to help where, timelines are slipping or you're finding a particular, execution very challenging and you need help. And I think that's where those networks come in your organization. And I think that's where that culture of inclusion, and, I mean it broader than, the D&I, being inclusive in how you lead and bringing people along your journey helps. It helps recover. And I also think leaving your job at the door when you go home, nothing is ever as bad as it seems. We're human. It's not just on one person's shoulder. And protecting your own health and well-being as a whole person allows you to come be in work, be more present, be fresh, and have the brain power to tackle, situations that really tax your resilience and you as a person. Like, in transformation, things like when you're letting go of people and doing redundancies, which is a natural part of business change, those are never pleasant things to do. And, you to be there to support people during things like that. Even though you're doing the job, you still have to have the energy to be human. And I think taking interests outside of work, whatever makes you happy, that's people that cycle, they compete. You may be an Ironman type person. I love cooking and music, and, I still go clubbing with my friends and I let loose and, and I enjoy my time off. So when I come into work, I'm like, right, I've got this. I've got the energy to go through this. So that, when you talk about work-life balance, it's been know to have fun and don't take yourself so seriously that you forget that you're human, you're more than your job. Right? It's all of it.
That's something that I really, I suppose, leaned into this year. I had a coach earlier this year who was really trying to help me with the work-life balance, because I've always been someone who's just worked. And my outside of work was going to the gym and maybe seeing some friends. And I was just very focused, which nothing wrong with that. I think at the time it was perfect for me, and to an extent it still is now. But I took up tennis this year. I was like, right, I need a hobby. I need something that's not the gym. That's something that I can do that's just going to get me out of my head for an hour a week. I just need to focus on something else. And it was the best thing for me. And I need to, I've stopped lessons recently because it's got a bit cold, but I'm like, I need to start that back up because it was fantastic for me in my headspace. But you're like you say, you're not your job. There is so much more out there, and make sure that you do have interests in things that you're doing outside of work that's going to keep you so it's a little bit sane, especially when you're going through the really, really tough times. And then also in that hour, 2 hours or whatever you're doing, you're not going to be thinking necessarily about, oh, I need to send this email and Sheila didn't come back to me this week. And, you're not going to be thinking about that, because right now I'm trying to hit a ball and aim for something and wasn't that great. So, yeah, I need to focus on that at the time.
Yeah, it just gives you something else to aspire in life other than your work. And, I know people have children, and I'm lucky I have my mum that helps me with my youngest, who's about 9, allows me time to do that. But sometimes even for your children, it's good for you to have that space, have space to reconnect with your partner. Like, these are good examples to show your children too, right? So yeah, have a bit of fun.
Yeah, life's too short. You need to enjoy it, right? It's something I want to speak to you about, actually, because I know, like I say, we've spoken a lot around, the coaching piece and all of these different aspects. Would you say that having a growth mindset is really important? And what does, I suppose, that growth mindset mean to you, and how can people cultivate that?
I think a growth mindset, like, I love it when that is actually stipulated as a value within like a company culture, because it, growth mindset to me is not being assumptive about just because you think something should be done this way and it's always worked for you. Be open that it might be different this time, right? So that you're not blinded by this sense of, oh, I know it all. I think there's a humbleness to knowing that you don't know everything and things change. So even when you think you've got an answer for something, could be different, could be wrong. Be curious, and be curious with people around you. Ask questions. I think learning is a lifelong thing. You're never going to feel like you've got it. And being open to that you could be wrong, ask questions and learn is a great way to cultivate that growth mindset. Be curious. Like, I think I love this new trend. I mean, I love and I hate it because some of it gets a bit like contrived. There's this new trend where people are very focused on life-based, not like self-help, but it's like topics that are being discussed now, right? Is a lot more what would have been considered quite woo-woo like 20 years ago, right? It's about like manifestation, and, it's about relationships and, breath work and your biological health and metabolic rate, and all these things are about people. These cultivate them, like learning about who we are as people and how you function is also about growth mindset, right? Because by looking in yourself and developing yourself as a human, you learn things that you can take into the workplace. And that is also cultivating that growth mindset, is being curious. How can I be better? Asking that question. Am I doing this well? Ask for feedback. We have blind spots, So that's kind of how I cultivate my growth mindset is, ask a lot of questions. I seek out people that know more than me, say, right, I'm really interested about cybersecurity. I don't get it. What do you do? And it's great. I learned something new and I'm like, I'd love to do that for a while. That sounds very interesting. So these things, I think, don't stop being curious. Like, this is why children, I think, learn in such a different way, because they are curious and they don't have assumptions and they just get stuck in, don't they?
It also shows as well, if we go back to the leadership piece, I think it shows vulnerability to your team. Because if you're constantly being curious, asking questions, and the amount of times I don't necessarily know something, so I'm going to go and ask, even if it's someone in my team, well, you know more than me about this, so what is this? That shows vulnerability, and I think people really respect that. So always be curious, and don't be afraid to do that with your teams and the people around you, because we don't know everything. And then from there, go away and work on yourself, try and become more self-aware to know, okay, this is something that might be holding me back. The more you can do that, the more you are going to grow naturally.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you learn a lot about yourself in that process as well. It makes you a better leader.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, once you know yourself, you should hopefully know other people a little bit more anyway. So I have a closing question that I ask everyone. And this question that I have for you is, what is one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
The one piece of advice, I tell you, the best piece of advice that I received, it sounds negative, but it's not. When I was really young, and I remember, I think I was like 21, and I just learned how to be a business analyst. Never done it before. We reorged, and I had a new boss, and she's like, I want you to lead the team. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know if I want the job. Sounds like a really big responsibility. I'm only 21, and I'm like quite early in my career, not that long. And I remember I was in like an interviewing training course, and I asked the trainer, because I was like, this is really bothering me. I'm a bit afraid. I don't know if I want this. And he turned around to me and he said, okay, I want you to tell me the worst thing that could possibly happen if you did it and it went wrong. I walked it through my head and I was like, okay, I might lose my job. And he's like, what would you do then? So get another one. He's like, okay. And is that so bad? And I was like, well, no. And I was like, okay, fine. And it stuck with me my whole life. It's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't sound very positive, but I think it's, don't talk yourself out of something. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. If an opportunity presents itself, it will be okay. I think I would tell myself, it's okay. You'll figure it out. You won't starve. You will be fine. You're healthy. You have a brain and, arms and legs. You're totally capable. It will be fine. And I think, I would remind myself that you can't predict everything. You can't control anything. You just need to have an intent and be courageous and brave and go, right, okay, I'm going to do this, and just do it.
Yeah, I love that. I try to live by that as much as possible. Like, what is the worst that's going to happen? Move to New York. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to end up back home at my mum's. That's fine. I'll have great cooking for the next year. Like, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, you got to put yourself out there. And you mentioned it actually earlier in the podcast around, you have to put yourself out there, go and speak to someone, go and, learn the skill set that you need to learn to push yourself forward. But it's all around, just take that chance, take that risk, see what happens. At the end of the day, what is the worst that's going to happen? There's always going to be something else around the corner, and you never know what that's going to be. So
I was going to say, just believe in yourself. Don't let rejection turn you away too much. Just keep going.
%. So yeah, like I say, I think this is a perfect way to end the podcast, because you mentioned so many amazing things here, and there's a lot of key takeaways that hopefully everyone's going to take from it, and myself as well. And really appreciate you taking the time today. And I'm sure it's not going to be the last conversation we have.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.